Hi, this is Lisa Rangel with Chameleon Resumes, the premier executive resume writing company. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today I'm going to share with you what you should be including in your resume now that we're entering the post-pandemic period. So I want to make sure that you're ready. I want to make sure that you're ready to either capitalize on any passive opportunities that come to you now that hiring has started to expand. I have clients that tell me that recruiters are reaching out to them. I have prospects coming to us going, oh my God, I haven't thought of getting my resume ready. I have recruiters reaching out to me now. I'm in a rush to fix this. So I want you to be ready. And in a nutshell, what should be on your resume in this post-pandemic period is very similar to what I suggested to you last year around this period when we were entering the pandemic about what to include on your resume and LinkedIn profile for that matter. But now that we're coming out of this pandemic, thankfully, right? Amen. You want to make sure that you're tying results to some of those things that you maybe put in your resume during 2020. Now that you have, 15 months behind you, you want to show the results of those scenarios that you described. So I'm going to give you a few areas that you're going to want to evaluate and determine if you should be including in your resume. You want to make sure you have wins in these areas ideally, or use these areas as talking points for interviews in terms of scenarios that you didn't do so well in, especially when you're asked about those challenges you experienced. So this is all fodder for you to be able to use either in your resume, in your profile, as well as your interview story. So the first area that I want you to be able to include some wins on your resume for this post-pandemic period is your ability to manage a crisis. We clearly went through a crisis, and I wanted you to outline successes you had, as well as any obstacles you faced and maybe didn't go as well, what you learned from it. That's what you want to include on your resume, on your profile, and in your interview stories. What did you learn? What did you accomplish with regards to crisis management in terms of how you can articulate that in these different forms that I just mentioned, your resume, your profile, your interview stories. So that's one area that you want to include. The second area that I want you to address on your post-pandemic resume is your ability to pivot. Now, that may be difficult for some in terms of what do you mean pivot, but think back over the last, year and a half, and at what point did you had a strategic plan that you were implementing, and you even maybe had a crisis management plan in place and you were implementing it. And then did something arise where you go, oh no, we got to do it differently. And in that moment you pivoted. You evaluated the situation and you and your team pivoted. So, and then what was the outcome of that pivot? What did you do? What was the situation that you faced? What was the action you took, and what was the result of that pivot? So it still comes down. So I want you to be able to articulate in your resume, your profile, and your interview stories scenarios where you successfully and maybe not so successfully pivoted, and then you can articulate what you learned from that situation, maybe where you weren't so successful. So show your ability to pivot. The third item I want you to include on your resume is to prepare and anticipate for change. Now, this may sound like a similar item compared to number one, which is crisis management, and number two, the ability to pivot. But to me, crisis management and the ability to pivot, while similar, they're different, but they're reactionary typically, right? But you want to show now with this third item your ability to anticipate different scenarios and have plans prepared in each of those scenarios. So which again could be part of crisis management for some people depending on how they define it, but you want to be able to show that you can maneuver your organization nimbly through different scenarios. And a lot of times the way you do that is to forecast scenarios, what would be the situation that would be encountered, what resources would be needed, what would be the weaknesses in that particular situation, how do you shore up the resources to, take care of those weaknesses in those particular, scenarios that happen. So you want to be able to show how you anticipated and put together a plan to anticipate this change. So to show that you're prepared. So you want to show preparedness. And a fourth item that you can include, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but a fourth item that you can include is, and this is really important, and maybe it even should have been number one in some cases, but you want to show how you attract and retain talent. So that includes attracting top talent during, the crisis, as well as retaining top talent during the crisis. And you want to show your retention levels were higher, plans that you implemented to keep people engaged. You want to be able to show that you cared for people during these times, because it's key. And if there were required layoffs to happen, that you did it compassionately. And I think it's important to show how you compassionately did that, maybe how the compassion was implemented into the plan. Was there extra days given? Was there extra compensation given? Was there extra counseling and outplacement given? Show where you went above and beyond to at least deal with a really terrible situation in the most humane, compassionate way possible. Because I think that's really important nowadays. If we've learned anything coming out of this, is that we really need to be more human at work. And we're not machines, and we're not robots. And I think leaders that can demonstrate that they did that, or that they learned from mistakes where they didn't do that, are going to be the ones who get really snapped up very quickly in this upcoming market, because we have to be able to take care of people. We've all been through something really challenging at different levels of challenge, obviously, but it has affected everyone in some way. And we're all going to be having, some sort of emotional, mental, physical fallout from it now that we're all coming out of it in some certain way. And obviously in certain countries, they're not coming out of it yet, or not coming out of it as fast. And in some areas, even in the US, there's going to be regression, and there's going to be advancement. So everybody's on a different level, but leaders that can show that they adjust to these different scenarios, especially if they're in a global organization or a multi-location organization, they're going to be able to need to demonstrate this in the documents that they have representing themselves, as well as in their interview stories. So these are 4 areas that you can include in your post-pandemic resume. And I encourage you to do so, because it'll help you keep things modern. It'll help you keep things contemporary. You have to have your documents and your interview stories address what you've recently gone through for them to appear current. So that's what I hope you do. And if you'd like more resources, I have a link in the description below for some free training. And if you like this video, I'm going to ask you to like it. If you know someone that can benefit from the information in this video, I'm going to ask you to share it. Make sure you subscribe to our Chameleon Resumes channel so you don't miss next week's video. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment below, or post your question below in the comments, or email me at lr@chameleonresumes.com. I read and reply to every comment and every email. So I look forward to seeing you next week, and I look forward to seeing you on the training. Take good care.